All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is doing well tonight. We are going to pick up where we left off last time in our refactor with our storage buffer objects and our sort of refactoring in the way that we handle materials and shaders for that matter, binding sets, bindings, all that good stuff. So the approach from here on out is basically going to be we're just fixing the code base, getting things to compile, and then we'll sort of step through any errors we come along, and obviously we'll have to convert the relevant shaders along the way. But that's pretty much where we are. So as far as that goes, before I get into it actually, I'm going to go ahead and just take a quick second just to thank the supporters of the channel, beginning with our elite partner Javier Lazaron and our partners Gabolis Inc. and Matt Osgard. They are the highest tiers of support over on YouTube memberships and Patreon, followed by our list of supporters here on the screen. They are a combination of the other tiers of support over on YouTube memberships, Patreon, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. It is greatly appreciated and helps me cover costs associated with running this channel, things like software licenses, hosting fees, various costs of that nature. So thank you guys for that. It is greatly appreciated. And of course, I hope it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways. I'd like to give a big thank you to all of you guys, the viewers, whether you're catching this live over on the YouTube side or the Twitch side. Without you guys, this channel and this project would not exist. So thank you guys very much for being here and following along. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Okay, so with all that said, we are going to continue sort of just doing our due diligence and kind of stitching things back together here. And like I said, once we get things at least building again, then we're going to go ahead and convert all the shaders to do things the new way, or at least the ones that make sense to do it that way. We may not do all of them right away in a pass, but we'll see where we wind up on that. All right, let me catch up on some chats here. Kelnay, how's it going? Good to see you. Ruche, good to see you as well. Pale Blue Zebra, good to see you as well. Welcome. Hope you're doing well. All right. So tonight, let's just have a look and see. I did get a chance to do some fixing offline, but not a whole heck of a lot. Been somewhat busy off camera lately with things. So let's see. So we got Vulkan image C. That's throwing some errors. Okay, so context, find memory context. All right. So I had changed this from being a function pointer to being a static function in the Vulkan backend, but I had forgot that it was also called in this file as well. Let me see. So do we actually need... I mean, I suppose one option would be to just move this file, or the contents of this file, to the Vulkan backend, instead of having this in a separate file, right? That's literally the only issue here. I think it's literally the same issue twice. Yeah. I kind of don't want that polluting the set of changes, though. So I think what I might do is go to here, find memory index, and the implementation of that is actually really straightforward. So let's see. Don't we actually have I think we have a Vulkan utils. We should probably have this there. Right now we're not actually using it for a whole heck of a lot, but yeah, this is probably where this should be. So let's go ahead and add this here. We're not going to have it static anymore, right? And we're going to just say Vulkan find memory index, right? And then we'll go over to the header file. And we'll come down here to the bottom. We need to be outside of this debug, actually, because this is something we're going to need regardless of debug situation. So I'll put that there, and then actually I'll take this end if, and we'll just move this guy up here. All right. And then I will remove this from Vulkan backend C. And then in Vulkan image, we can just do Vulkan find memory index and Vulkan find memory index. Okay, so that's it for that. I don't think I renamed that in the backend, so that's actually going to be an issue here. Okay, so that's fixed. Okay, so now we've got some function pointer problems, which I'm not totally surprised about. Let's see, this is the Vulkan buffer map memory. Right, we did change the signature of that. Okay, so we do have Vulkan buffer map memory and unmap memory. Let's see, do we have... Did we actually map the get map to memory either? I don't actually recall. So let's go to render types and map memory. If I can type. Okay, so before map memory returned a pointer to the memory that was mapped, we no longer do that, right? And that is because the render buffers now can be internally, they can be internally like triple buffered, right? So we need a more reliable way to get that. And so whenever we're going to use the map memory, we just use this get mapped memory, which it looks like we already have. So that actually should probably be sufficient to fix that. And then the renderer front end is going to need to be changed as well. So we've got an issue here. Again, that's just going to be changed to not return anything. Same here. Whoops. And so obviously we'll get rid of the comment there as well. And then we have already the get mapped memory mapped, if you will. So all we have to do is change that from being a return of the map to memory to just return type void. All right, build that. And, oh, we got some unused variables. Okay, that's not a huge deal. Potham, good to see you. 3D Code Warrior, good to see you as well. Welcome. Hope you guys are doing all right tonight. Okay, looks like we got a bunch of unused RHIs in here, which is not surprising because I just kind of copy-pasted that all over the place. So, let's see, we got 5 of them, I guess. So let's work from the bottom up. We'll go to, let's see, 4257. That was 4257, right? Oh, set config. I guess we don't need that. Okay. I'm just going to comment it out just for convenience. 3495. That RHI is not used. We can delete that one. 2766. That RHI is not used. 2744. That one's not used. And 2717. That one's not used. Cool. Undefined reference to string n format. Did we not? Did we not? Use string n formats. I could have swore that we already set all this stuff up. Oh, I forgot to export the token. That's why. Or the symbol, rather. Let's do that there and there. Okay. Well, Foley, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Welcome. Let's see. Too few arguments to function call. Render buffer free. Okay, this is the UI standard library. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. So I guess what we should probably do. What was that in again? Oh, it was in label. Okay, SUI label. Oops. So this we basically just need the a pointer to the renderer system state, which I don't think we actually have. Does the standard UI state contain it? No, it does not. But oh, yes, it does actually. Okay, perfect. So all we actually have to do is do state was state, right? I think. Oh wait, this is the shader system it's going to need, isn't it? Oh, that's for groups. Per group, and oh, we haven't done this yet for the UI stuff. Right. We haven't evaluated that shader yet. So we are going to have to do that. But at least what this tells us is like we're done with the core runtime changes. At least we're code complete on that. So I guess let's start with the fragment shader. So let's see, what did we have? We had projection, view, diffuse color, some samplers, the model matrix, and that's it. Pretty simple stuff, actually. So realistically, there's two ways we could handle this, right? Using a storage buffer here would probably work. But I tend to kind of think it's a little bit overkill. And we need to make this stuff work with our binding set configuration. So I think we could probably get away with, I guess it would be a binding set situation that is almost exactly like what we have here. It's just instead of using the whole uniform per frame, per group, per draw stuff, we just convert it to kind of using the new way of doing it. So I guess let's do standard UI. I guess Yeah, I guess we'll start here. So instead of uniforms, this is going to be binding sets, right? And this is going to be an array rather. Let's go to the bottom and change that to be an array. And then the internal sets in here are just going to be just objects instead, right? So, so we've got that. And then each one of these has bindings, right? So how do I want to do this? This technically is going to be, the name of this one is going to be SUI global binding set. And then our bindings is going to be an array, right? And that array is going to house, in this case, one object. Or I should say one single binding, right? So this binding is going to be the SUI global UBO, right? In this case, let's see, the type. This is a binding type. It's no longer uniform, right? So in this case, it's going to be a UBO. And the size of that UBO is going to be 128, right? So 64 and 64. So that should be fine. And then we essentially just need to carry this set of changes down, right? So let's go here. Tab all these in. And then this is going to be, let's see, how do we want to call this binding set? And in fact, the diffuse color is not even really something we need in the group, right? We don't actually even need this UBO. So I'm going to take that out of there. I'm going to take this diffuse color and I'm going to move it down here to what's going to become our immediates, right? Not that one, sorry, there. So we don't even need this. That'll simplify us standing things up a little bit. That's going to move this binding to index 0 and this one to index 1. So the only thing our binding, let's see. Oh, you know what? This is actually, the atlas can change per object, right? So what do I want to call this one? I guess we could call this SUI per control binding set, right? The name doesn't really matter. It's just kind of for our own debugging purposes. And so we have an atlas texture and an atlas sampler. So those line up correctly. That's what we want there. And then down here, our final immediates, which how did we actually say that we were going to define that? How did we say that we were going to define immediates? I'm trying to remember. Apply immediates. Did we actually have I don't know that we actually defined that in our shader configuration. That might be a bit of an issue. No, we don't need to define that. That's right. Because we said that our immediates are always going to have a maximum of 128. So, sorry, I've been away from this for a little bit. Sometimes these kind of things Slip my memory. Okay. So we actually don't even need this last set, right? Because immediates just pass a block of 128 byte data maximum, right? So we don't even have to define that in our shader config. This is the only thing we have to define, is these two binding sets, and that is it, right? So we have in the shader itself, we have a binding set 0, which is sort of, I guess, what we'll rename to our SUI global UBO, right? And I'll just use that name there twice. And then we have our texture in our sampler from the next binding set 1. And then we have our push constant, right? And this we're going to rename, I guess, immediates. What do we do in the standard? What do we call that here? Immediate data and immediate. Okay. Immediate data and immediate. All right, so I don't believe that we are going to have multiples of these yet. So I'm not really going to worry about that yet. So all we need to do is, let's see, instead of the group UBO at this point, this just needs to be the immediate diffuse color, I think, is the only thing we actually have to change here. So that is the that's the fragment shader. It's still pretty simple, right? There's not a whole lot to it, so thankfully this is going to be a pretty quick change. First time chatter, one allergen NTMX. I probably completely butchered that. Sorry about that, but welcome. First time chatter, and thank you for the follow as well. I appreciate that. Zuaki, hello over there on the YouTube side. Lou the Coder, good to see you as well. The way you implement all these systems, do you often do research beforehand on how they're implemented, or you just implement them on the fly and figure things out yourself? Or is it just past experience? So it's a little bit of all of those, right? So if there's something that I definitely want to work a certain way based on past experience, that's usually the primary driving factor. And I think experience with it in general is one of the primary driving factors. But there are systems that I've done research on beforehand, and I usually don't stick with any one particular design that I've seen somewhere 100%. I usually use the parts of it that I think are best, and sometimes it's a combination of different things that I've found. And then some stuff we kind of feel out on the fly. So particularly things where we're like, hey, let's try this thing and see how it works. Because one of the things that we do on here is experimentation, right? And go through the sort of conceptualization, the conceptualization of it through to the implementation of it, so that you guys can kind of get a sense of my thought process behind it and why we're doing it, whether that be right or wrong, right? And then we sort of do a little bit of a review at the end to post-mortem, if you will, to see how off base we were. So yeah, it's kind of a mix of all those things. Magette's good to see you. Gotta simplify my dumb name. Yeah, I've had some pretty terrible ones in the past too. That's one of the reasons, like I was trying to come up with something, like when I was starting all of these channels, I was trying to come up with something, and I'm like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna use my name, whatever. It's easy enough, I guess. Not that I recommend that everybody do that, but okay, let's take a look at the fragment shader. So let's do shader UI, or that was the fragment shader. We want the vertex shader now. Okay, so vertex inputs for this aren't going to change. It's going to use our standard vertex 2D, which just takes a position and text chord. We are going to keep the first binding, so that is fine. In fact, I'm just going to copy pasta this over here, just so we can have the naming update. The per group UBO, that's gone. We don't need that anymore. All we need are these two bindings here. So we're gonna again move those to 1 and 0, or 0 and 1 rather. And then the per draw UBO is basically going to just become our sort of immediate that we had before, right? So we've got that, and that obviously is our push constant, right? So I've moved diffuse color from that sort of per group to this. That way, when we go ahead and stand this up, all we have to worry about is a single binding instance here, and then I guess we need to figure out, here how many instances we have, but we'll figure that out in just a second in the shader config. So we've got that, and then the only other thing we'll have to do is come down here and change some of these names. So it's going to be SUI global UBO. Same with this one. And then the draw is just going to be immediate model, right? Now, as far as this goes, if we start using transforms a lot, we could in theory, hook up the transform SSBO to this, and maybe at some point we will, but for now I'm not going to bother. Let's see, do we have anything else in here? No, we do not. Okay, so I believe that is everything we need to do for the vertex. All right, so the other thing is we have this max groups and max draw IDs, which, come to think of it, we don't have that in the asset handling for this anymore. Let me take a look at material renderer and see if we actually changed that, because I'm pretty sure we renamed that to like max instances. Yeah, we did. Max instance count, right? So we did not actually define that in here. Instead of defining it up here, we now define it down here. So I think we had max groups and max draw IDs at 512. So the only thing that we actually need to set here, and this is going to be max instance counts equals 1. Whoops, equals 1. And that is really just for the global. We only need one of those, right? But this guy, we need max instance counts equals 512. That means we can render 512 different little UI things. Obviously, we're probably going to want to bump that number up at some point, or handle it differently using instance rendering or something like that. But for now, that's what I'm going to stick with. And so we can get rid of these two things. Okay. I think that about does it for that. So we need, let's see, what was that under? SUI label, I think, is where we were running into errors. Where was that? SUI label. Yeah, it wasn't here. Okay, but there's some other stuff I'm seeing in here that needs to be fixed as well. So let's just bat that off to the side. Let's see. We need the state pointer for the renderer at some point in here. So we'll do renderer. Need that in a few spots. This is also going to be the same thing. This is going to be the same thing again. So that's going to be a little bit of a running theme tonight, I think. Any of the spots in code where we have not... oops. Any of the spots in code where we have not updated this, right, because we're kind of passing the state everywhere now, we're going to have to go through and do that. Okay, so this was the per draw acquire and group acquire, which no longer exists. So we're going to skip that for a second because I just want to go through here and get the rest of these other errors resolved. Okay, let's see. All right, and then that's shader group release and draw release. Okay, so those are the only 4 errors in the entire file. So what we have this sort of typed data, right? So if we take a look at what type data is, I'm actually just going to go to the definition here. This is the SCY label internal data, right? And so this has a group ID, group generation, draw ID, and draw generation. So the only thing that we actually need for this is going to be for this per control binding set instance, right? So we're going to say U32 binding instance ID. That's what we're going to call that. And get rid of those, right? So that just means binding instance ID is where that's going to go. And then we're also not going to have, we're not going to track generation anymore, and we're not going to have multiple sets of resources, right? We're only going to have the one, which is for the per control in this, right? And then this global one will be done by the system once. So what we need is kshader acquire binding set instance, and that's going to be what was that? So this is actually the shader system, so we don't actually need the renderer here. So we just need the shader and then the binding set, and then it gets returned instead of passing a pointer. So we just take this guy, and I guess I'm just going to actually do that, and then take this, and we're going to do binding set 1 is what we want there. And then we'll say if typed data binding instance ID equals, let's see, what was the return type of this? U32, okay. So invalid ID U32, right? So we'll get that. Binding index 1 or binding set 1 is going to be this one. That's the one we're going to want to use. And that's basically going to be a little bit of a change that we're going to have to make kind of across the system, right? So we have that. We've got a couple of other errors fall out from that, right? But most of it's going to be actually deleting code. So we're going to do kshader release binding set instance. And this, I believe, just takes the binding set, and then, whoops, the binding set is going to be 1. And then binding instance ID is going to be there. And then we don't bother to check this anymore. This is just a return type of void, so we don't actually need any of that. So all we need to do is then we'll just do typed data binding instance ID equals invalid ID, right? And then we can get rid of all this group ID, draw ID stuff. Don't need that stuff anymore, right? Let's see, what other errors do we have in here? Defaults. Yes, that is... Oh, wait, no, this isn't defaults. This is actually binding instance ID. The renderables are still using group ID and per draw ID. So that's no bueno. We need a trying to think why we had a pointer to this. I don't remember what the motivation there was for that. I'm going to put a fix me in there. I don't remember what the justification for that was, so I'm going to tag it. Okay, so this is going to be binding instance ID. Right, and this is going to be the per control instance binding ID, right? For binding set 1. Okay, so this is going to be binding instance ID, and then we delete that one. The other thing that I want to do is before we actually when we go to create this, well, I guess we probably should do just for a sanity check, right? We'll do type data binding instance ID equals invalid ID. We don't have to specify the 32, that's the default, right? We'll default it to that first when we create it. That way, if we do truly fail or for some reason, I mean, this returns invalid ID if it fails, but I guess it's being explicit, right? All right, let me see. Sakelis Music, good to see you. How have you been? Singy, good to see you over there on the YouTube side as well. Hope you're doing okay. Seem to know what a game engine needs and how to implement it too. How did you get the knowledge? Worked on commercial game engines, something in a big company, or yes, it's experience, right? And also research and lots of doing it. I did do it professionally for around 5 years, and then. So I learned a lot doing that. I've also had a pretty big interest in working on it sort of in my spare time over the years as well. I also did some random contract stuff towards the end of college on the Torque 3D game engine. I actually co-wrote the material editor for that. So it was just, kind of stuff like that throughout the years. Touch and go, very touch and go. But yeah, it's just a culmination of experience, research, trying things out on my own, learning how to do it, reading up on it, looking at examples of game engines to learn not only what to do, but what not to do, that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to assume this is probably going to throw an error at the next UI control. Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull that up over here. Let's see, this is going to be SUI text box, and I can close this guy because the implementation is going to almost wind up being the exact same, right? So instead of this group acquire business, we are going to acquire a binding set, right? So we're just going to do, let me actually do, take this, come over here, and I'm actually going to replace that whole block, right? Let's see, type data, okay. So I guess, did we have this? I guess we had this for each individual. We did. I don't know if I love that, to be honest. I think I'm probably going to wind up refactoring this at some point too, to make it a little bit more lean and mean, right? But we're going to do binding instance ID. I'm just going to plug it in and make it work. But I think we're going to wind up redoing that at some point, just because I'm not a huge fan of the way it's done at this point. It was kind of one of those experimental things as well. All right. Is that... Were we not releasing that? Because I should have gotten another... Womp womp. Okay. Releasing the binding set instance should be happening in... Do we not have... Oh, it's because it's subcontrols. Right. Okay. I'm not going to worry about it for now. UI is going to be something that we're definitely going to have to retackle before we get too far into the game, because I want to make it a little easier to use as well. And configurable, right? I want to be able to set up a... I'd like to be able to set up a file that kind of looks like this to be able to, you know, configure our UI. All right. So SUI button is going to be the same thing. So the button, again, is going to have this acquisition of, oops. That's funny. This should be label, oops. And this should be shader binding set resources. Anyway, dingus indeed. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Been all right doing daily grind things. I feel that. I feel that more than I can actually say right now. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so this is going to have the same type of change. So we're going to do U32 binding instance ID. If I can type, get rid of these. Okay, and binding instance ID. That's going to be the same thing. Okay, cool. So that one's done. SUI panel. Okay, I think this is the last. I think this is the last one. Yeah. Yeah, so this is going to be literally the same thing. All right, so we have U32 binding instance ID. All right, and then binding instance ID. Let's see what's next. Luminoscene. Okay, that one's not too surprising, but at least we're actually to gameplay code now in our refactor. That means we're getting close. Let's see, what is this bleating about? Apparently something in Illumina types. I don't know, Illumina renderer. Directional light. Shadow pass render data. That should be yes. Should just be a light identifier. Okay. That's going to have fallout in the Luminoscene renderer, but that's fine. Okay. So our point light entity we no longer have this point light data, right? The only thing, let me take a look at this real quick. So we have this version of the point light entity that gets serialized, right? So this is the base version that gets serialized, and then we also have the data that gets sent to the shader that does not get serialized. So we need to keep a separation between those two, right? Because when we're editing, right, we have to bear in mind that like the color of the light can change over time, right? But we don't necessarily want to save that state. For example, like if we're previewing the scene or something like that, we want to know what the initial state is, right? So this should be a color 3. And then we actually, come to think of it, the only thing we need here is a K light, right? And this is going to be a handle into the light system that contains the data. Because we don't actually send any of this to the shader anymore. The light system does that for us. Okay, so we're gonna have to keep that in mind because I think that's probably gonna come back in a couple spots and get us. Okay, so vertex buffer. Okay, this is actually. Let's do.
You dingus.
Do we actually have? I don't think I store. I don't think I store the like a pointer to the renderer in here. I probably shouldn't, but so we'll have to get that whenever we need it. All right, that's fine. So for something like this, we're gonna have to do struct renderer system state renderer equals engine systems get renderer system, right? That's been something I've been thinking about too, is kind of avoiding having to do this all over the place too. But that's going to be for a future thing. All right, so that's going to be the change that we're going to want in a couple places here. Right, so we're going to want this here as well. And then this is going to be renderer there and there. And then also the same thing here, except I'm not going to put this in the middle of a case. I'm going to put this up at the top, right after the assertion. Right, so here we can just do, oops. Yeah, same thing there. Okay, and then add water plane. This is a static function, I think. Oh, not quite. All right. Do we have? We didn't get that. Okay. So I'm gonna need back up this way. Gonna need this guy, and this is gonna be, like I said, that's probably something that I want to rethink. That's one of those things. It's like, let's try this and see if it works, and it kind of works. But it also kind of doesn't. It's kind of also a pain in the ass. All right, what's the rights? Okay, so render data is going to be the next thing, right? And I think our scene render is going to have a lot of fallout from this. But the skybox group ID, Let's see, that should be shader set 0 instance ID, right? So this is going to be set 0 instance ID. Maybe I should have been more explicit with my naming elsewhere too, but why is it complaining about that? U32. What? Set 0 instance ID. What the hell did I call it? Oh, shader. Yeah, this should be shader. There we go. Okay. Wow, that's really it for here. Okay. That wasn't too bad, actually. Like I said, I think the renderer is probably going to take... Yeah, it just gave up reporting the errors. That does not surprise me. Okay, so Illumina renderer. 92. I bet a lot of these are fallout from the renderer interface change, though, so I'm not really going to panic about that, right? We also do have that stored, which is nice. So here I can do out renderer, and then renderer state. And then here, out renderer, renderer state. Okay, so this is going to be a big one because it looks like we still have all of our uniform logic in here, which we no longer have. That's a good thing because we're going to be able to strip out a lot of stuff, but let's see, shadow pass. Ooh, have we even done that yet? I don't know if we've done that yet. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Decided to stick with using classes for the WAS API device and session callbacks. The calls go through the virtual tables regardless. Dealing with classes seems more straightforward and less code, depending on how you write it. Did have a go at trying to do virtual tables in C, but getting GUIDs for the interfaces was such a headache. So I would question why you're doing virtual tables in C. I mean, unless you're just trying to learn how they work, right? But yeah, that might be kind of a hint as your approach is probably not correct there. First time chatter, Terror 2012. Welcome. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining us. LSR, good to see you. Saw this super cool. Yeah, I'm not going to click that link. I don't know what that's to. So, turns into your PC into a mini console with SD cards as cartridges. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I don't make a habit of clicking many links. Especially on stream, because you never know, right? After the NPM thing, and anything is possible. Exactly, right? Yeah, 100%. Taking one for the team and clicking it. I can click it after. I can click it off stream. I've got like a sandbox machine that I can use to click it. So I'll save it and have a look at it off stream. How about that? That is kind of an interesting concept, though. I'd be interested to see what they do there. But yeah, like I said, I'll look at it off stream. Let's see. Have a question. How comprehensive did you get with your model loader? I've been using ASIMP for my projects, which seems quite robust. It's also huge. Whenever I clean build, it takes at least 5 minutes to compile ASIMP. Considering going to much more lightweight loader or building my own, which could be a fun challenge / learning experience. So I highly recommend that. But that being said, one of the things that I ultimately decided to do, and this was kind of somewhere where I landed after experimenting with it, is I made a separation of assets versus like source assets, for lack of a better term, right? Um, so think of it this way: an engine asset would be like a Kohi texture, right? Or a Kohi material, or a Kohi static mesh, right? But the thing that comes from, like a JPEG or an OBJ or whatever, um, is obtained via a importer, right? Which is an external tool set. So I've externalized that stuff. So that means that anything that I do rely on for that, like for image parsing, I did not want to write format parsers for 16 different image formats, right? I used Sean Barrett's library for that, right? The single header library to parse images. Same with fonts, right? That's a solved problem. There's not a whole lot of value to writing a custom version of that. OBJ, I did write my own loader for that on stream, just so we can kind of see one way to do that. But all of those libraries now are externalized to my toolset, so they're not part of my core engine. And so at some point, I probably will just only build the toolset as part of an explicit like build process, right? I won't build the toolset every time I build the engine in the game, and that'll save. So that's one way you can do it. That's the way I would recommend doing it, because then you're also not shipping that stuff with your runtime, right? Because ultimately, like, you don't want to be using ASIMP in your runtime that you ship as part of the game. You don't want to be importing assets from source formats like that, right? You want to have your own format that is set up so your game can read it as fast as possible. And so yeah, I would externalize all that stuff to an importer. That way it's separate from your runtime. Your runtime is smaller. Your build time's faster. Your iteration time's faster. And you don't have dependencies in your core engine. The only dependencies that exist are in your tool sets, and that's completely, it separates that, right? I hope that makes sense. Trying to hook into some Windows C++ only API or something. I assume you're talking about the WAS API. Yeah, probably, if that's what you mean. COM interfaces for the callbacks don't seem to give any choice but to use virtual tables. Oh, I forgot you were using that. Yeah, I've avoided it for so long that I've forgotten most of it. Seems legit. Yeah. Sacrificial LAN machine. Yeah. You know, that's what I should actually name the computer. I should name it Sacrificial LAN. 100%. I like that. It's pretty nice, and I have an old Chromebox. Be perfect for this. Too bad it's dead. I mean, yeah, too bad. Kind of gets in the way of things, right? Planning on supporting QOI. That's the quite okay image format, if I remember correctly. An HDR out of the box. Write like wrappers for libping and libjpeg, maybe WebP. And on Windows, WIC would handle it. Yeah, see, I would still probably import those to my own custom format just to make reading as fast as possible. Look into that a little beyond the scope of my knowledge, but knowledge I do want to learn. Yeah, fair enough. That's the only way to do it, right? You mean only at runtime, wait, you mean only at runtime, right? Editor still would use source assets. So, you're serenading my left ear. Is it an equalizer problem? I don't think so. I'm showing up as... Yeah, as far as I can see here, it's going to both channels in OBS. So if something's going on there, I'm not sure. Sorry, mobile keyboard. Yeah, no worries. So when I say runtime, I literally mean the Kohi runtime, right? This central Kohi library, which which the application is based off of, right? So when I'm talking about the runtime, I mean this. When I am, let's see, let me reread your question. So the editor would actually kick off the external toolset to import stuff, right? So the editor will make use of the runtime. It'll make use of the Kohi core, obviously. The editor itself is an application, right? But that would also have references to the external tool chain that I've set up. So when you go to actually import something from the editor, there's a couple ways you could do it. I could either kick that off as a different process and then just wait for that to communicate back, or I could hook into the code directly and just, static link it and all that good stuff. But either way, it's still separated out that way. For some reason, I mixed your name and the title of the stream and read Travis CI. My work is starting to make me crazy. Yeah, I can understand that. It always makes me laugh a little bit when I see a .travis file. Are you a follower of Kel Solar on Twitch? Represents the C community in Sweden. I didn't know he was on Twitch. I know who he is, but I'm copying that down. Wonky Circle, hello. How's it going? I can hear you on the right, just low. I'm on headphones and I'm hearing both sides. Yeah, so I'm wondering if it's an audio issue there, because as far as I can tell, my mixer says it's going out stereo. Sounds fine? Okay. Yeah, so you might be having an issue there. Appreciate the confirmations of the audio. Thank you, guys. Corpse Kombucha. That name's hysterical, by the way. Love it. First time chatter, welcome, by the way. Tried his tool called Ministry of Flats for automatic UV unwrapping of 3D meshes. Ooh. Dang it, Magats, I'm going to have to write that down too. UVW unwrapping is one of my least favorite activities. I would say it's probably only outdone by rigging. Beard is awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's censored tool. It did? I didn't even see that come through. That's bizarre. Okay. Maxon actually licensed the tool into Cinema 4D. That's pretty cool. Awesome. Good stuff. Let me see. Let me catch up on the YouTube side. I'm a little behind on comments over there. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. How big is your arena/arenas? Do you have multiple? Maybe one per each system, material, lease, DS camera, or one global arena? So what we do right now, I think I set it up as 2 gigabytes at the moment. And what we do is when we do a what I call a K allocate, right, which is kind of our own version of malloc, it pulls from that, right? And then we tag it. So we have these memory tags that every time we allocate, we tag each of those allocations. And so we have all these sort of categories that we can tag. And my intent there is to use these tags to group like allocations together in different blocks of memory, and potentially even use a different type of allocator under the hood for some of those things. Some of them don't really matter. Some of them are just for reporting purposes, like linear allocator is one thing, or array or whatever, right? Yeah, like putting all the strings together might be a good idea at some point, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's kind of the idea here. And then we actually have reporting on on how much space we're using for each one of these things and all that kind of stuff. So right now we essentially have one huge arena that we allocate. I think I've got it set to 2 gigs. And then from that, we allocate everything else. So there are other smaller allocators that I use throughout the system that ultimately come from that large arena. But yeah. Let's see. How to make such a cool Tmux theme. Or is it Vim? Yeah, it's all Vim. Tmux, my Tmux theme is actually the default one. I have... Give me a second and I will... Oh, you know what? Actually... I'll do it this way. Assuming the bot works. Apparently it's not going to work. All right, cool. Streamlabs bot is... Oh, it just took forever. All right, there it went. So that's a link to an article that I wrote about my NeoVim setup, and it also has a link to dot files. In there, you will also find information on this theme. Let's see. Could you show what you have at the moment, what features, and what is your main job? Okay, that's a loaded question. But so my main job, my day job, is not related to this at all at the moment. I switched away from game development a few years ago due to work-life balance issues. But what I can do... So I can't actually run this at the moment because we're in the middle of kind of a large refactor. So I'm going to show you kind of the project page and then a couple of dated screenshots. And at some point we will have things running and I'll be able to show you a little bit more. But the engine itself is written from scratch and C uses Vulkan as its rendering backend for now. It's designed with multiple rendering backends in mind. So we have planned support for DirectX and Metal backends as well. I'm basically going for as feature complete as possible before I do those other backends. So the project itself is free and open source. It's available on GitHub. In fact, I'll just drop links into the chats right now. So that link takes you to this website. If you scroll down here towards the bottom, you'll see a contribute on GitHub link. That'll take you to the code base. The code base itself is here. The engine itself is sort of designed to be an educational resource on a way to build a game engine. It's not the only way to build a game engine. Sometimes it's not even the right way. We do a lot of trial and error on here and experimentation, as I've kind of talked about here recently. But with that said, since it is an educational resource, I don't believe in paywalling that stuff. So the engine itself is Apache 2.0 licensed, which means that it is free for use, whether it is personal or commercial. Does not matter. The only thing that I ask is if you use it, you say that you used it, and that's it. Literally it. There'll never be any sort of royalties or licensing fees of any kind having to do with the engine. Now, the game code that I write, that'll be a little bit different. I won't be open sourcing that right away until after the game is released, which I think is fair. But there may be parts that we take out of the game code and put into the engine so the engine's got a more complete experience. If we scroll down a little bit, I've got just a couple of quick screenshots here of our PBR, our basic PBR rendering pipeline. We've actually enhanced it since this. So we've got cascading shadow maps, your basic PBR pipeline. Not really a whole lot to say about that. We've got a custom UI system that we wrote from scratch, including all of the text rendering and all that stuff, including UTF-8 text rendering as well. And so yeah, these are just a couple of dated screenshots. We've added a lot of stuff to it since then. But yeah, I think as soon as this release goes out, we'll have some more visual goodies to get in here. Lol boy, how's it going? Good to see you over there on the YouTube side. I usually see you on Twitch. But yeah, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate that. I realize I'm a few minutes late on that message. Let's see. Not today, but can you show us what you wrote that Kohi material, Kohi texture system? What's the thought process? And How do you load them at runtime? Yeah. So we can go over that at some point. I think we're probably getting to the point now where maybe after this release, I might stop and do sort of an architecture review, and or a, hey, this is where the engine's at, and we'll just kind of go through things. I think after this release might be a good time to do that. Let's see what else. When you say feature complete, what does that mean? So I guess that's a bit of a misnomer, right? Because it's probably never going to be feature complete. Feature complete to the point where I can make the game that I want to make with it. Now, technically speaking, I could do that now, minus a couple of big things that I still have to add. The main big thing that I have to add is animated meshes, and that's the very next thing we're going to work on after this refactor is done. Ray tracing is not needed for the game I'm going to be making, so that's not going to happen anytime soon. PBR we already have. There are some enhancements I want to make to the renderer. But yeah, feature complete is basically what I need to make the game. And the game is a sort of isometric perspective 3D action RPG. Yeah. We've talked about the design a little bit on stream. And we're going to do a lot of design sessions on stream as well about that. Anyway. Curious, and maybe this is a dumb question, but what is the advantage of adding a DirectX backend if Vulkan is compatible with Windows? It turns out it's my headphones. Oof. Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good question. So Xbox, for one thing. Because I do have plans to port this to consoles at some point. Probably after we release the first game. If we get decent sales with that, then I'll be pushing this to some consoles anyways. So Xbox is one of the ones I want to target. And that is Direct3D, right? The other thing is, there's always the possibility that somebody's got hardware that either doesn't work with the Vulkan setup I've got here, or is more performant using Direct3D, right? So on Windows, they'll have the option to run one or the other. On Linux, you'll be pretty much just Vulkan, and then Mac OS, that's eventually going to be Metal, and I probably will eventually remove Vulkan support from Mac OS since that has to go through Molten VK, but that's not for a while. So the way the order of operations there is going to be, we'll get the Vulkan renderer done first, and then once I get there, I'll aim to get the Metal backend done for Mac OS so that we've got feature parity there. And then I'll do Direct3D last. Just makes it more robust. Yep. And also the other purpose, like, again, this is like an educational series, right? Is the idea here. So one of those things that we're exploring while we're doing this is how you might design an engine with that kind of thing in mind, right? Because a lot of tutorials and stuff, they'll just have their OpenGL code like right in the middle of their game code, for example, right? But if you want to ever change that, coupling it that way just doesn't really work very well, right? And so I've designed the renderer front end API that the rest of the engine communicates with that in mind to keep it as agnostic as possible. So that way when we write additional backends for it, all we have to do is essentially plug and play them. So yeah, it makes it more robust. And just, on Windows, like I said, it'll give you an option. And then on Mac OS, you'll get a better experience because you'll be running Metal instead of going through an emulation layer or a translation layer. Something like PoE/Diablo, RNG loot oriented. So
You dingus.
kind of. It's like a mix between those and maybe Elden Ring in terms of combat. So it's a little bit different than those. Although those are fantastic games, and I will be modeling some things after them for sure, in terms of inspiration. But yeah, it's not just going to be like a PoE or Diablo clone. No, definitely not. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Okay. So all right, what did I run into here? Illumina scene. Okay, let me backtrack here. Okay, so... Oh, wait. No, we were done with Illumina scene. Why is this complaining? You know what? Let me... It was the renderer. Okay. So... SUI per draw UBO. Okay, so these things are actually going to wind up going away too. Well, some of them anyways. So we're going to have to talk about those as we convert these shaders over to do what they need to do. We do know that this has happened, right? So we do know that this per group structure is gone. This is also going to be the, I guess we'll say SUI immediate data. So I guess this is kind of an example of the multiple backends that I was talking about and how we kind of architect the engine to have that kind of stuff in mind, right? So on the Vulkan platform, immediate data is a push constant, right? Whereas I know that Metal and Direct 3D have similar concepts, right? But they're called different things. So, you know, I don't want to go with like Vulkan terminology, right? We go with something that's sort of agnostic of that. And so that's kind of the reason that we go with this, right? Let me see. So I think this should be part of the SUI files. This should be in the standard UI header. Even though it's not really used outside of our renderer, our application renderer has to know how to render it, right? So let me see, where do I want to put, let's put it here, all right? And instead of calling this SUI per frame UBO, we're going to call this SUI global UBO. All right, so that's going to be that. And that just has the view and projection matrix. And then the immediate data is here, right? So that's going to be, we're going to say global UBO data for the SUI shader, right? And then this one is going to be immediate, so i.e. every draw data for the SUI shader, right? So that gets rid of a couple fix-me's. And then also the Skybox frame UBO. Did we? I don't think we did the Skybox shader yet, so I may have to come back to that one. All right. Right. So the Shadow Pass. We have not redone that shader either. We probably ought to tackle that one before we do this, right? Because this is kind of the old way that we handled things. So we had like these uniform locations, and we can just kind of uploaded data kind of the old school OpenGL way, right? We were just trying to sort of see if we could replicate that to see if that was going to be easier to use. And it worked, but the overhead isn't worth it. Okay. So we actually have a couple of shaders we're going to have to mess with here for our shadow pass. So I guess we probably ought to look at those. Let's see. What about the car game? So that was something I wound up tabling, at least for now. Reason being, I did a little bit of market research on that, and those kind of games just aren't doing well right now. Any of them that released weren't really selling all that well. There's not really a demand for it. What I might wind up doing is maybe putting in some sort of mini game in a future game, or just releasing it as kind of a tech demo for Kohi or something like that. But I didn't really want to dedicate the time to make like a fully polished game for something that really just isn't going to be that popular. Had it been 20 years ago, probably would have done really well, but not so much right now. Are you using a custom physics engine or Jolt bullet? So the game that we're making does not actually require physics. We're going to build the entire thing without a physics engine because we don't really need it. Yeah, there's no need, right? We've got the ability to check for collisions on objects in a scene. But we don't need like full physics simulation for what we're doing. If you think about the way that a lot of these action RPGs work, is they kind of work a little bit like a walking simulator. If you think about it, you've got a platform that's just essentially a nav mesh or some sort of geometry that's defined in 3D, and your character mesh just slides along that and plays a walking animation, right? That's really all that's happening there. And then when you do something like you interact with a ladder or you want to jump from one platform to another, that's kind of a scripted thing that can happen, right? Now, you can make it so you can free jump and fall off the edge and all that stuff. I don't know that I'm going to go that route. I think we're going to try doing the sort of pre-scripted transition from one platform to the next, right? Like you walk to the edge and press X on your controller or something and it just jumps for you, right? I don't really think that that's going to be like a huge gameplay element one way or the other, right? Diablo didn't really do it. PoE doesn't do it. I don't think I'm going to do it either. I think it's not worth having the whole, an entire physics system just for that. So we're essentially going to have various platforms that you slide around on, essentially is what's going to happen under the hood. And then you can transition from one to the next, right? And that's all that's going to be. We don't need physics simulation for that. Jeet, how's it going? Good to see you. Welcome. The Road Rash inspired game, yeah. So that's going to be something. I don't want to completely toss that idea out, right? Because I do like the idea. It's just the market demand just isn't there. I'm much better off making this game, for sure. Even though I really want to make that game. There's not much point if it's not going to sell, right? Ultimately. But like I said, I might wind up doing something else with it. I've got a couple of ideas on how I can pivot that idea into something cooler and different. All right. Right. The Shadow Pass shaders. Let's see. Do we actually have... We do have these defined this way still. So I almost kind of want it to, similar to how we did with the material shaders, how these don't really reference these files, these are kind of defined in code. I kind of want to do the same thing with the Shadow Pass shaders. Not going to do it now, but it is something I've been thinking about. So this is just going to go to binding sets, right? This is going to be that, and then this is just going to be converted to an object. Let's see. So we do need a base color texture, base color sampler. Those are for transparency sampling. So we do still need those. And then we have these immediates down here that we don't actually need. Okay, so we'll do bindings. Oops. Right, we'll do bindings. We'll move this in. We'll do a name for this is going to be, I guess, shadow static mesh UBO, global UBO, right? So we'll do max instance count, and for this one it's going to be 1. And then the bindings themselves is just going to be, oh wait, this name belongs down here. I've bungled that a little bit. Right, so this is going to be shadow static mesh global binding set, right? Name of it doesn't really matter, it's just for debug purposes. And then this is the global UBO, right? So this guy, the type is UBO, and we don't have, why did we have array size is? Why do we have array sizes 4 for that? This should have been like down here. All right. Let's see. So yeah, this should be UBO because we're not dealing with transforms anymore. We are dealing with binding sets, right? And bindings. So that's our first binding set. Our second binding set is going to be, let's actually just do this. Right, and then we move these guys in, and then here, oops, be nice if I could quit hitting the wrong keys. Okay. So this is going to be, what are we going to call this one? This one's going to be the shadow static mesh material binding set, right? Because there's really going to be one of these per material. So up here we have our max groups of 256. So that means we have, we're also going to have like a maximum instance count of 256 here, right? So we can essentially have a maximum of 256 materials represented this way. And that's going to be only materials that are transparent will actually count against this limit. Materials that are fully opaque will all just use the same thing. So that's just kind of the way that particular shader works. So that's probably way and above and beyond what we'll ever need, but that's fine. And then per draw, we don't need at all anymore, because that is all in the immediate data, right? So we just need to change our shader. So we'll do We want this one. So instead of per frame UBO, oh, we didn't have a size here, did we? We do need a size for this one. Let's see. That's going to be 256. Right, because we have 4 of these guys. And this is one of the reasons I want to do it in code, right? So we could just have this structure defined in code and then use the size of instead. But so this is going to be global UBO data and then global UBO. And then we don't have a per group UBO for the shader. I'm just going to remove that comment, right? So this is set 1. These don't actually need to change. And then our per draw is just going to be immediate data and immediate, right? Data is going to remain as it was before. And then all we have to do is essentially just rename references down here. So we've got, actually, I don't think we have anything that we have to worry about here. Nope. Okay. I think we're good, actually. So I want to carry this over to the vertex shader. And we're essentially just going to copy this over because we have, so we capture the renames, right? So we've got that, and then we have the immediate data here. And I'm just going to get rid of that comment because it doesn't really apply anymore. And we've just got a couple things. Move that over a little bit. There we go. So frame UBO is just going to be global UBO. And then draw UBO is going to be immediate. Just for consistency, right? We don't have to rename these things. I just think it makes a little bit more sense in terms of keeping the C side consistent with the shader side. Which terminal is this? WesTerm. Yep. Yeah, you did get it. Welcome, by the way. Yeah, I use WesTerm because I can use it on the 3 platforms that I commonly use. Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, and it works. It gives me pretty much the same experience across the board. It's a pretty good terminal, I have to say. Sorry, terminal emulator, if I'm being specific. Okay. So, what we need for this, for the binding sets, we need to set up our bindings, right? So we have a single binding for our global stuff, and then a for our static mesh material binding set. Yeah. So for this, then we have 256 instances of this. I think that's way too much, to be completely honest, but it is what it is. So instead of all of this stuff, what we really need is, let's see, so the shadow pass data, so we need a U32, and we need a, let's see, how do I want to set this up? I guess we'll call this shader set 0 instance ID, and then a U32 array set 1 instance IDs, right? And then we can do a U32 shader set 1 max instances. Max instance count. Max instances is fine, right? So we'll get rid of all of these locations, get rid of the max group counts and the group IDs and the max draw count and the draw IDs. Make all those go bye-bye. So, oh, that's for the static mesh. We should probably think about a different name then. Let's do static mesh, right? And then we can take these down here. And for the height map terrain shader, which we haven't actually set up yet, but we need to actually do that as well. Oops. HMT for height map terrain. And we can get rid of all of that. Let's see, default group ID. So default group ID is going to be replaced by set 0 instance ID. So we don't need that anymore. Okay, I think that's good for now. We are going to have to do this with the other passes as well, right? So we see we have the forward pass data here with texture locations, right? We're going to have to fix all of these as well. But I figure we'll tackle them one at a time. All right. Is NeoVim setup yours or predefined one like LazyVim? It is something I came up with on my own. In fact, I will link. So that link right there has got a, it's an article I wrote up on my website with my complete NeoVim config, or I should say a listing of all the plugins that I've got, and then a link to my GitHub repo with a copy of the config on there, if you're interested. It's mostly up to date, I think. I just updated it not too long ago, so it should get you there. What's the difference between a terminal and a terminal emulator? A terminal is basically it's the thing that it's kind of a leftover from legacy machines, right? Where you had a mainframe and then you had a terminal that would hook into that mainframe, right? So when people talk about the terminal these days, they're usually talking about this application, right? But really what this is it's a terminal emulator. Because back in the days, you had a mainframe machine that was huge and a bunch of people would log into it, right? From a terminal, which was an actual physical machine. And it was just a dumb terminal. You may have heard that phrase as well, where that computer itself didn't really do much of anything. The only thing that it was really designed to do was to connect to a mainframe, right? So when you talk about a terminal, that was where that came from. So when you talk about the terminal emulator, WesTerm is a terminal emulator, right? So it's emulating kind of what an old terminal used to be. And then it kind of just is connecting to your local machine, which is kind of the mainframe, kind of. It's not exactly it. It's an oversimplification, but that's the idea. Terminal used to be the whole machine, which made commands textually. Emulator is the GPU and everything else, as I remember. Yeah, it's pretty much like the... Wait, no. Emulator is... The terminal emulator is like this application, right? Technically, your local machine is emulating more of the mainframe than anything else. Or not emulating, but your local machine you can think of as the mainframe that this connects to. It is a legacy thing. Yeah. I had to think about it for a second. I didn't have a lot of experience with those. I've messed with them some, but yeah. Nobody's saying terminal emulator at this point. The other one became a physical terminal. Yeah. It's just if you want to be pedantic about it, right? Like a lot of people are like, it's not a terminal, it's a terminal emulator. Okay. I'll be pedantic about it, you know? But yeah, most people just say it's terminal, but In fact, I think even hang on. Give me a second. I'm just looking for something. Okay, so literally, WesTerm, Wes's terminal emulator. So it's not nobody that says it, right? It's literally called a terminal emulator. And multiplexer, technically, because that's it has a multiplexer in it, but I just prefer tmux. But yeah. I think Alacrity said the same thing. Yep. Yeah, I thought so. Alacrity says it too. Terminal emulator. So, yeah. Anyway. Technically. Yeah, I think Ghost TTY says the same thing. Yeah, most of them I think do, actually. So all terminals we see are emulators. Yep. Yep, exactly. Exactly. Okay, so we have... Why are we taking...
You dingus.
Why are we taking the max group? Why were we doing this? That should be defined by the shader. What a dongus. What was I thinking about here? Oh, you know what? I don't think I haven't... I think I know why I hard-coded that, and that actually is a bit of an issue. So when we do this shader get, if the shader already exists, it'll just kind of return the handle to us. No big deal. If it doesn't exist, it'll go ahead and load the shader from disk and then return it. But I don't think we actually have a way to get binding set counts. Like, we can get binding set instances, right? But like, we can't get the instance count. No. So we need a way to get the instance count for a binding set. And I think... Oh, we didn't save that off anywhere except maybe the renderer. Nope, it's in the back end. Poop. Which I suppose is where it belongs, kinda. Otherwise, we're storing 2 copies of it. I don't want to have 2 sources of truth. Okay, so what I'm thinking here, we need some way to retrieve those counts, right? Because we don't want to do crap like this, where we make assumptions and assume that what is defined here is also what's defined here. That's poop. The only way that I can think to actually do this is we have the binding set here. Binding set states. And I think in this, we have the max instance count right there. So, what we really need is a new function. I'm going to put it right here. So it's almost going to be the same, or at least it will be up the same up to this point. So it's going to be renderer shader binding set get max count. That's really long, but oh well, it is what it is, I guess. And then we'll just return that count, right? So we could just return binding set state max instance count. That should be max instance count. I hate how long that is, but I don't see any way to like shorten it. I'm not going to overthink it. All right, so let's just go here and put in a new function, and then go to backend interface and acquire binding set instance. So right here is where we're going to put that, and we're going to change this to a good old function pointer. So we're just going to do that. So we're going to get rid of the Vulkan and the renderer bit, and we're going to do a struct tag here because that's for declared, right? And then we can take this and go to the renderer front end. We'll put this here, and we'll undo this. We'll do renderer. Right, and then we'll just assert some things and do, let's see, this is going to be state. So we need, this has to be struct renderer system states, and then this needs to be states, right? Because that's going to be the state for the front end. And then it's going to return, instead of set instance, we're going to do shader binding set get max instance count. We don't need that, right? And then we're going to do return, right? And then we can take that, toss it into the header, export the symbol, then take this. Oh, wait a minute, there's one more thing I have to hook up. Gotta hook up the function pointer. Otherwise we're going to be in a bad way. Oh, did we not? I didn't hook any of them up. That's cool. Let's see, Vulkan, renderer, acquire, binding, set instance. And then backend, shader, release, binding set instance equals Vulkan, renderer, shader, release, binding set instance. And then backend, shader, binding set get, max instant count, Vulkan, renderer, shader. That one. Incidentally, the reason I normally hate getters and setters is because of crap like this, right? Because we literally have set and get in the function name, right? That's why I'm not normally a fan of them. This is one of the few places where getter and setter makes sense because we have this sort of interface that we have to go through. Otherwise, I'm generally not a fan. Thank you for the hydrate redeem. Appreciate that. what are your thoughts about publishing on Steam and all these platforms taking 30% revenue? So, for one thing, I'm going to be publishing to Steam, right? Steam provides you with quite a lot, right? They provide you with advertising, distribution. Those two things alone are huge, right? Those are huge costs. Publishing, in a way, right? Now, if you were to go through a publishing company and then also go through Steam, you're like double screwing yourself, right? So I don't have a huge issue with it, to be completely honest. Would I rather not do that? Sure, but at the end of the day, I can tell you that my game will sell better on Steam than it will if I were to try and handle it on my own. And I would certainly take a harder hit if I were to go through a publisher. It'd be higher than 30%, I guarantee it. So to me, it's, yeah, of course I want all of it for myself, right? But like, it's just not realistic. I don't have that huge of a following where it's going to be able to make that big of a difference, right? So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. Shakama, hello. How's it going? No way, getters and setters and C. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, this is one of the places where, one of the only places I think it makes sense, right? And because we have this binding set, right? It's a binding set, but like, then it's a getter for that. I'm not a huge fan of it, right? But the whole purpose of this was to separate out that Vulkan state into something else that the rest of the engine doesn't have to worry about. And this is the cost we pay for that. There is no such thing as a zero cost abstraction, right? So this is one of the cases where I think it's worth paying that cost. That cost is fine. I'm okay with it in this case because of the benefits we get from it. Ordinarily, I'm not okay with paying it. That's the business model of Steam. Otherwise, I'll go bankrupt. They pay for your game to be available. Yep, exactly. Yep. That's why I don't really mind it, right? It's hosting, which is another big thing. It's bandwidth, right? And you don't have to pay any of that stuff. So, yeah, I don't think it's really unfair, to be completely honest. And they also provide you with a system to, like, hand out keys to the software and stuff like that. Like, that stuff adds up, Let me just put this. So now I'm going to put this here. And instead of max group count, we're going to have set one max instances is going to be K shader binding set. Why is that not working? Oh, because it's the renderer. Let me think about this for a second. So we want the out renderer state. Then the shader that we're going to have is out renderer shadow pass static mesh shader. And then the binding set we want to acquire that for is, 1. Right? And we don't have a thing called max draws anymore. Right? So this is kind of the new way that we're going to acquire that count. And then obviously we'll have to do the same thing for the terrain shader, which is going to be right here. Right, so this is going to be HMT, and then we just need to do HMT shader, right? We still have to convert that one, but there you have it. Okay. So we don't need that anymore. We don't need any of that anymore. I'm not actually even thinking we need that anymore. So really, I think next time we can kind of just continue here, right? But unfortunately, I am out of time for tonight. Because I do have to get up early for work in the morning. So let me just catch up on a couple chats and also your game can be seen by literally millions of users. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, yeah, I think it's fair. Only issue is Steam doesn't consider price parity. $100 in some countries is too much. There is a way around that though. You can set your own pricing in different countries. That is a thing that you can do, and that's a thing I'm very much going to do. And we'll go over that. We'll go over that at some point on stream when I get ready to set that up. That's a long way off, but yeah, that's one of the things I have in mind that I want to do, for sure. How do you deal with the Unicode, like extended grapheme clusters and all that fun stuff? I just found one character that is 41 bytes long. It's such a headache. I don't deal with it in that. I don't deal with like edge cases like that. I limit what I do, right? I mostly just support things like, Chinese, Japanese, Korean symbols. Things like that. I definitely would not say I have full on 100% UTF-8 support. I don't have support for like scripted fonts like Arabic that have the little, I forget the like ligatures or whatever the term is that connects the characters together. I don't have support for that either. Maybe at some point, but not at the moment. 30% for Steam is okay. For the Windows Store, iOS App Store, I don't agree with. Yeah, I don't agree. I don't agree with that either. All right. Let me find somebody to raid. And while I do that, I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I enjoyed your company. I hope you guys were entertained. And I really appreciate you guys being here. Incidentally, if you have not followed already, I would greatly appreciate a follow, either on the Twitch side or the YouTube side. I am trying to grow my channels, and so every little bit helps, and I really do appreciate that. I'm just trying to loosely find something that's kind of related to what we're doing here. If I can't, then so be it. All right. I think I know what direction I'm going to go. Just bear with me just for a second here. All right. I think we're going to go with Z.A. Shaw. Looks like he is working on a 80s style retro dungeon crawler in C++. So we'll see what he's up to. And yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys in the next stream. See ya.